The Damiano Demon Part 2. Thank you for joining me. Make sure you catch Part 1 on YouTube. Here, Bishop Monforton of the Diocese of Steubenville celebrates the Catholic Mass under the San Damiano Cross at the Franciscan University of Steubenville. The Mass is the most important part of Catholic worship and is considered a very holy and sacred event. During the Catholic Mass, after reading the Bible and a sermon is given, the preparation for communion begins. Special prayers are said by the priest or bishop that is believed by Catholics to change the bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ. The theological term used for this transformation is called transubstantiation. The Catholic Church is very strict about the prayers that are to be said and the bread and wine that is to be used during the Mass. Any variations could nullify the validity of the communion. And here you can see a picture of Bishop Monforton from Steubenville celebrating Mass right under the Damiano Demon. The rules are so strict that only Catholics with a clear conscience can receive communion during the Mass. Others can attend the Mass, but they are forbidden from receiving communion for a number of reasons. Typically, because of the significance of the Mass, everything associated with the ritual is specially prepared and chosen. The prayers are all approved and in accord with the directives called for in the Church law directives. To celebrate the Mass under this cross icon gives a clear message that the Church approves of this symbol, and it is appropriate for the celebration of the heart of the worship within Catholicism. The Church has sent out the message to the world that this cross is to be honored and respected, and is a very special symbol of the Catholic faith. Anyone who questions the cross and its symbols contained within it could be questioned and censored. Is there any reason for a Christian to question this cross? At this point, I would like to point out the phallic symbol on the stomach of Jesus, pictured on the cross, located in the stomach area on this icon, is an actual phallic symbol. The icon dates back to the 1100s. The name of the painter is unknown, but it was fashioned around the year 1100. Free Thought Nation tells us, while some deny that the imagery depicts anything other than stomach attributes, it appears to the savvy that the artist has continued a long line of phallic symbolism, designed to be hidden from vulgar eyes. In this regard, the artifact is building on ancient traditions of phallus worship, most blatantly demonstrated in the reverence of the Roman god Priapus or the Greek god Hermes, both of whom are represented in numerous depictions with erect phalli. So here, the Damiano Demon, you could see on the stomach area is a phallic symbol. And it's been, they've said it's stomach issue, stomach or whatever. But we've discovered it, the experts have looked at it, and what we have here is a phallic symbol that was implanted on the actual art. Okay. The erect penis was commonly used in religions of early Mediterranean and Western Asian civilizations to show the procreative and protective properties of various deities. There's concrete evidence showing the link between the cross and the phallus in classical pagan civilizations, a link which was to continue into Christian art and mythology in the image of various types of crosses. Even the adoration of phallic pagan deities disguised as saints associated with phallic rituals. Many of these ceremonies were carried out in churches under the auspices of the resident priest as recently as the early 19th century. Because the phallic symbols and phallic worshippers have existed since the earliest days of life on earth, it shouldn't shock us that in Italy there were phallic worshippers at the time of St. Francis. Most likely someone into phallic worship wanted to honor and focus on Christ's procreative and protective properties. Clearly a risky insert into Christian art, the artist remained anonymous, not wanting to face the Inquisition court. Clearly artists can depict abdomens without making them look like an erect penis. A a logical conclusion would lead us to believe that someone tried to incorporate phallic worship using an image of Jesus Christ. I would say that this artist was more interested in converting Christians to phallic worship than the opposite. He might have been sincere in his work, thinking that the focus on Christ should be his creative powers as opposed to his sacrifice and love he gave on the cross. A careful examination of the icon cross also reveals someone who was not accurate in his understanding of the crucifixion of Jesus as revealed to us in Scripture. Here I included an image of Hermes, a Greek god that dates back to 520 BC. There's not much difference here except the god revered here is Hermes and not Christ. So, phallic worship, it's been going on for a long time. Very long time. So, phallic worship is the worship of the erect penis. This is what constantly got ancient Israel in trouble. The only symbol for Baal worship was the erect penis or obelisk. Here is an Old Testament passage that tells of Jehu destroying the phallic images after killing those that encouraged phallic worship. Quote, "They hauled out the sacred phallic stone from the temple of Baal and pulverized it. They smashed the Baal altars and tore down the Baal temple. It's been a public toilet ever since." And that's the story of Jehu's wasting of Baal in Israel. 2 Kings 10, 26 through 28. In our modern times, phallic worship continues and is much more open and even publicly advertised. St. Priapus Church was founded in Montreal, Quebec by D.F. Cassidy and has found a following mainly among homosexual men in Canada and the United States. The church which is named after the Greek god Priapus, teaches that the phallus is the source of life, beauty, joy, pleasure. Phallus is to be worshipped and can be accomplished by variety of sexual acts, including group masturbation. Semen is also treated with reverence and its consumption is an act of worship. The most important thing to remember is that phallic worship is pagan and its origin and has no place in Christian worship. Phallic worship predates Christianity, as we see from the information above. The Christian church teaches us that Jesus was celibate and never had any children. That Christian truth shows that the icon cross is inaccurate in saying that Christ was procreating while he was on earth. Jesus never referred to phallic worship as acceptable or permissible. Perhaps phallic worship had an influence on the Da Vinci Code belief that Jesus had a child from Mary Magdalene, but this is rejected by Orthodox Catholics and Christians. Here's a legitimate and then here's another example of a phallic cross. So why was St. Francis so drawn to this particular icon or cross? I'm sure he had seen many crucifixes in his day, yet this particular image had a huge impact on him. Everyone agrees that after having a spiritual experience in front of the cross, Francis' life changed dramatically. Francis claimed that the cross began speaking to him, saying, "Go, Francis, and repair my house, which as you see is falling into ruin." He immediately began to try to obey the voice, which led him to steal from his father, get scolded by his bishop, and renounce his earthly father by stripping in front of him and giving him his clothes back. This was documented. There was a court hearing with the bishop. The important question here is whether this was God or the devil that spoke to Francis. Also, what attracted a disillusioned young soldier to such an unusual depiction of Jesus? These are important questions that have to be answered. As an artist myself, I have my own ideas as to what would have attracted Francis to this particular image of Jesus. First and foremost, the eyes on this image are mesmerizing. They convey a realism that many young people are searching for. A Jesus who is real, close, near, and present is the Jesus that Francis was seeking. He had many questions about his life, family, war, church. The church experiences that he had previously did not satisfy his hunger for a deeper encounter. The image of Christ was unlike any other he had ever seen. Plus, it was an icon Like all religious images, an icon has its purpose acting as a window to heaven, a portal through which one sees greater truths that cannot be revealed by words alone. So the image here is relatively calm and peaceful. There's very little blood shown on this image. There is some blood, but very little. Jesus does not appear in pain at all. His eyes are open, staring out into space, not focused on anyone in particular. He does not appear to be overly muscular. Although he has facial hair, he is not overly masculine in this image. The fact that his feet are apart at the bottom clearly shows us that this is not an accurate crucifixion image. Can't see that on the book cover. We did see it, I guess, when they were saying, yeah. But you can't really see his feet there either. But his feet are separated. Okay. The people closest to Jesus are engaged in their own conversations. This tells us that this is not an accurate crucifixion scene. They're not crying, looking too sad either, which is not the biblical description of the crucifixion. There are angels present and there are soldiers down below, which are clearly out of place. The TOR Franciscan website points out, as mentioned before, behind Christ is the open tomb. Christ is alive and standing over the tomb. This is clearly a post-crucifixion image. Christ stands upright, not nailed. The eyes of Jesus are open. He looks out to the world which he has saved. He's alive, the one who is eternal. Jesus' vestment is simple loincloth, a symbol of both high priest and victim, which is from Michael Scanlon's book. And he was also a Franciscan who was responsible for this getting mass distributed, partly responsible. Any honest examination of this image clearly reveals that this is not the crucifixion. It is clearly the artist's imagination at work, mixing crucifixion imagery with resurrection imagery, leaving the viewer intrigued and questioning. Interestingly enough, Father Scanlon's booklet on the imagery on the icon includes details about a rooster, but ignores the phallic symbol completely. Interesting. Very interesting. He explains around the cross is various calligraphic scrolls, which may signify the mystical vine. I am the vine, you are the branches. He goes on to explain there are 33 figures in the icon, 2 Christ figures, 1 hand of the Father, 5 major figures, 2 smaller figures, 14 angels, 2 unknown at his hands, 1 small boy, 6 unknown at the bottom of the cross, 1 rooster, 33 nail heads along the frame just inside the shells, and 7 around the halo. How convenient. Yet they missed the phallic symbol in the middle of his stomach. This is the problem. When you try so hard to justify something, you start stretching the facts, trying to prove your point. I believe it is possible that the Franciscans purposely tried to direct our spiritual attention away from this phallic symbol by pointing out so many details and giving them spiritual connections that were never there to begin with. Perhaps they were hoping to avoid the scandal of having people find the phallic symbol pointing to all other details on the cross. They presume the artist is some deep mystic with all these supernatural insights, yet there is no knowledge as to who the artist is. A biblical analysis of this icon shows many inconsistencies with the biblical account of the crucifixion. When I met with Father Michael Scanlon, TOR, retired president of Franciscan University of Steubenville, in the summer of 2016, I asked him if he was aware of the phallic symbol on the image. He informed me that he was, but that he hadn't originally taken it seriously. But now, after all the pedophilia in the church, he is taking it very seriously. Father agreed to bless my efforts to investigate the possible connection between the phallic symbol on the cross and the pedophilia scandal that has damaged the Catholic Church. I was very blessed to have prayed with Father Scanlon, pictured below, during our wonderful meeting. There's Father Scanlon and me, Tom Venditti, before his death, where he acknowledged that he found out there was a phallic symbol on this cross and he gave me his blessing to pursue it. So that's the only reason I went ahead with it. Rape of the Soul, Chapter 7. The documentary film entitled Rape of the Soul by Michael Colaci points out some very interesting facts. He claims that before Francis' death, he ordered Clare of Assisi to hide the cross from the public. He insinuates that Francis eventually realized there was something wrong with the cross and did not want it available for public viewing. In 1257, the poor Clare's sisters left San Damiano for San Giorgio and took the icon with them. They carefully kept the icon cross for 700 years. In the Holy Week of 1957, it was placed on public view for the first time over the new altar in San Giorgio's chapel in the Basilica of St. Clare of Assisi. So if Clare of Assisi had the rights to the cross and her sisters took it to San Giorgio after her death in 1253, why did the friars not object? Francis had died in 1226 and was canonized in 1228 by Pope Gregory IX. There were many miracles connected with Francis' life and many eyewitnesses to these miracles. Before he died, he received the stigmata, the wounds of Christ on his flesh. In 1224, he received the stigmata during the apparition of seraphic angels in a religious ecstasy, making him the first recorded person to bear the wounds of Christ's passion, according to my sources. There were so many documented confirmed miracles in the life of Francis that it is very important to note that his encounter with the San Damiano cross is not a confirmed miracle and was not even mentioned by the Pope during his canonization. This fascination with the cross is only a recent interest, initiated by someone in the Vatican in the year 1957. In the Holy Week of 1957, it was placed on public view for the first time in 700 years over the new altar in San Giorgio's chapel, the Basilica of St. Clare in Assisi. A few obvious points to make here are as follows. Why was there no record of any dispute in regards to the ownership of the cross? There clearly seems to be a consensus that Clare of Assisi was entrusted with this cross. Francis obviously made this known to his brothers, and no one has ever disputed the poor Clare's to be in control of this cross. The question is truly, why did Francis give the cross to Clare and not leave it hanging at San Damiano where he found it? According to Michael Colaci, Clare was instructed to hide the cross. He implies that both Francis and Clare were aware of its powers and must not have been confident that they were from God. This is where phallic worship and belief comes in and intersects our story. According to The Reluctant Saint by Andy Ashiu, Francis stole from his father after hearing the cross speak to him. At a town hall called by his father, the bishop reprimanded Francis for theft. Francis then stripped naked in front of the town gathered and renounced his father publicly. A very honest question to ask is whether Jesus would have inspired Francis to do this. According to some, Francis wondered whether he was crazy, and the people gathered there called him madman, madman, madman. Francis left the gathering with no idea where he was going. The people were recorded as saying he was the new crazy man of the world. According to the author Akshiu, Francis had no idea where he was going after the meeting with the bishop. This is the main idea put forth, namely that Francis was not a saint at this point of his journey. The voice he heard had led him to desperation and humiliation. Was it Jesus or was it the devil that spoke to him? Remember that the devil also tempted Jesus to do things that were wrong. Jesus resisted the temptations. 1. Then Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, where for 40 days he was tempted by the devil. He ate nothing during those days. And when they had ended, he was hungry. The devil said to him, "If you're the Son of God, tell this stone to become bread." It's Matthew 4:1. Francis was a sinner and did not resist the temptation to take what was not his. This, however, was understandable because he was a sinner. The good news is that Francis eventually got it together and became a great saint and evangelist for Christ. This distinction is not made by many, and it leads to false veneration of a cross that could have been used by the devil. The cross was left behind by the church when they closed the old chapel at San Damiano. The voice from the cross led Francis into breaking at least 2 commandments, which is don't steal and honor your father and mother. Also, have no gods before me. He also stripped naked in front of the townspeople who had gathered at the town square, which prompted the bishop to clothe him. Francis ordered the cross hidden and entrusted it to Clare of Assisi. The church never confirmed the encounter with the cross as a valid apparition. The artist is unknown and never came out of hiding, even after Francis began his ministry. The most obvious problem with the cross is that there is a phallic symbol on the stomach of Christ. These facts and details need to be revealed in light of the fact that since the cross was made public in 1957, the Catholic Church has been plagued with a pedophilia scandal that has been possibly the worst scandal in the history of Christianity. Another example of a phallic cross right in the midsection. It's where they put it. It's not even anatomically correct. Chapter 9. Is there a connection between the public veneration of the phallic crucifix in 1957 and the pedophilia scandal that has hit the Catholic Church? Could the voice that led Francis to strip naked in public before men, women, and children be the same voice that had persuaded countless priests covered by their bishops to molest thousands of children? Obviously, Francis of Assisi never molested any children, but stripped naked in public by today's standards would be met with suspicion. Is the phallic symbol a portal for evil spirits, especially spirits that tempt men to do perverted things? Clearly, the pedophilia scandal in the Catholic Church has been happening on a large scale since the release of the Damiano Cross in 1957. Was this ceremony of public veneration an actual releasing of pedophilia demons upon the Church? As shocking as this might be, I believe there could be a connection. Certainly, pedophilia has been happening before 1957, but there seemed to be an explosion of activity during and after this time. In the late 1940s, American Father Gerald Fitzgerald founded the Congregation of the Servants of the Paraclete, a religious order that treats Roman Catholic priests who struggle with personal difficulties such as substance abuse and sexual misconduct. In a series of letters and reports to high-ranking Catholics leaders starting in 1957, Fitzgerald warned of substantial problems with pedophile priests. He wrote, for example, that sexual abuse offenders were unlikely to change and should not be returned to ministry. He discussed the problem with Pope Paul VI and in correspondence with several bishops. The culture of pedophilia was present in the church during the 1950s. I believe this is one of the reasons this phallic image was made public for veneration during this time. What other reason would there be in releasing this cross to the public since it had been hidden for 700 years? Certainly there was nothing about the life of St. Francis that needed retold in the 1950s. These were the years leading to Vatican II, the sexual revolution, the anti-war movement. There was no movement to evangelize Muslims at this time, which Francis was committed to. One might say that the church needed renewal, which would connect Francis to Vatican II, and that the cross would be a symbol of the renewal of the church. However, there's no acknowledgement of St. Francis as having inspired Vatican II. It appears to me that St. Francis had been the target of the devil since the beginning of his quest for truth. By appearing to him through the phallic cross and then having this cross resurface during the pedophilia scandal is significant. At a time when ISIS is beheading Christians, why are the Franciscans not initiating evangelization efforts to convert Muslims, as Francis attempted? Why is Assisi the place chosen by the church to bring all the religions of the world together for dialogue and common prayer instead of conversion? Why is Francis the saint called upon for exposing climate change and animal rights, while no efforts to evangelize Muslims are happening by the majority of Franciscans? chapter 10. Take a look at the interesting news article. Art restorers have discovered the figure of a devil hidden in the clouds of one of the most famous frescoes by Giotto in the Basilica of St. Francis in Assisi, church officials said on Saturday. The story can be found all over the internet. Basically, the artist Giotto subliminally inserted the face of Satan in the famous painting. The devil was hidden in the details of the clouds at the top of the fresco number 20 in the cycle of the scenes in the life and death of St. Francis, painted by Giotto in the 13th century. So if the church can admit a devil was subliminally inserted into a fresco venerated in the Basilica of St. Francis, yet not remove it or cover it up, why would it surprise anyone that it could be true of the Damiano cross as well? The argument in not removing the fresco would be it is part of the artist's expression and want to respect freedom of expression. Same can be said for the Damiano. It is part of the artist's expression, and we want to display the original. This thinking might work for some, but when you follow the logic, it doesn't work. Jesus cleansed the temple of money changers and said that his Father's house is a house of prayer. In the Old Testament, we read of the destruction of idols by the Israelites as previously quoted. This lukewarm attitude on the part of the church in allowing satanic art and phallic art to be displayed in the sanctuary is not a good thing. Jesus clearly said the lukewarm will be spit out of his mouth, Revelation 3:16. Satan's face appears facing the body of Francis directly in the center of the fresco. Interestingly enough, this devil's face was hidden for 700 years until it was discovered in 2011. Fresco is pictured on the next page, and the controversy can be easily researched online. The church is very aware that artists are quite capable of hiding things in paintings. Sad reality that San Damiano cross has been well incorporated into Catholic worship space is a difficult pill for many to swallow. The good news is that God is purifying the church and helping all believers to focus their faith on Jesus himself. So this is the fresco, and there's a devil's face in there, and the church has admitted it. All right. Sorting through this maze can be quite the challenge. Clearly, the pedophilia scandal has been destructive to the Catholic Church. There are so many victims whose lives have been forever changed. There have been suicides by both victims and predators who were involved in these horrible encounters. The money paid out has been staggering. Over $2.5 billion spent in the U.S. alone has caused financial ruin in many dioceses across the country. The decline of the American culture has accompanied the decline of the Catholic Church in America. Christian moral values have been replaced in our country with tolerance and acceptance of immorality. The Catholic Church is facing a huge challenge in light of this horrible scandal. Pope Francis seems to be leading the church in the direction of reform and humility, recognizing that there are many problems needing corrected in the church. This has angered many traditional Catholics who prefer the Catholic Church to be more aggressive in bringing people into the Catholic Church and returning to more traditional practices and liturgies. So, Chapter 9, Franciscan University of Steubenville. In my research on this topic, I've been challenged by many people to back off and leave it alone. I first discovered the phallic symbol at a Defending the Faith conference hosted by Scott Hahn during the summer of 2015. Dr. Hahn is probably the most popular Catholic theologian in America. The conference occurred on the campus of Franciscan University of Steubenville, where I graduated with a bachelor's degree in theology in 1985. I was introduced to the icon cross during my time at Franciscan University. This cross was everywhere on campus. Every classroom, every chapel, every office, every dormitory on campus displays this cross. Clearly, there's an obsession with this particular cross on the campus. The artwork on the icon is what is most impressive. The eyes of Christ are very engaging, hypnotic. Colors and many figures on the cross make a pleasant experience on the eyes. I'm sure Francis of Assisi experienced the same sensation when he first gazed upon this cross. As a student, we were taught to lift our hands to this cross during times of worship and praise. The spotlight was shown on the cross, and loud music was being played while everyone present would direct our hands, palms extended, toward the Damiano cross. This would go on for hours, and it was not unusual that something unusual would begin to happen. There were times when laughter would break out throughout the congregation. Other times there would be shrieking from people. Still on other occasions there would be speaking in tongues and prophecies being spoken to the crowd. There are even times when someone would pass out on the floor after having been slain in the spirit. This practice continues to this very day. It's a common ritual on campus for students, priests, and faculty gather before this cross, lift their hands to it, worship the image through songs. The spotlight on the cross is directing and leading your eyes to the actual image. These rituals take place in the chapel as well as the field house, where sometimes thousands of people are assembled to worship through this cross. I myself have participated hundreds of times in this ritual since 1983. Yet it wasn't until last summer, 2015, that my eyes were opened to the phallic worship that was taking place. In Father Scanlon's book on the San Damiano Cross, he says, here at Franciscan University of Steubenville, we hold the San Damiano Cross in very special reverence. It represents to us both our tradition as Franciscans and our mission to be committed with our lives and our resources to renew and rebuild the church in the power of God. We have placed the cross in central places in our chapels and around campus. We are inspired to deepen faith and commitment through our reflection and prayers before these crosses. So there you have it. Amazingly, Father leaves out the details of anything negative regarding the cross. We have already covered, this is what I call fantasy Catholicism. That sounds great. There's a lot of converts, but ultimately produces bad fruit when people mature and come to grips with reality, especially the horrible pedophilia scandal that has crippled the church. The church then loses credibility with many people and become part of the cover-up. Finally, the most obvious oversight connected with this story, which any conservative, Orthodox, or traditional Catholic or Christian should have picked up on, is the fact that this cross was originally rejected by the church and left in the ruins of an abandoned chapel. I can assure you that everything of value was removed by church officials. Otherwise, Francis would have sold the valuables instead of stealing from his father to raise money for the tools. The more one reviews the facts, it becomes rather clear that the Catholic Church in Assisi left that large icon behind in the ruins of the abandoned church building. It also makes one wonder whether there was something going on in the church building that caused officials to close the building and reject the cross. Could it be possible that there was phallic worship in a community that had used the building for pagan worship? Did phallic worshippers inhabit the closed down building? These are questions that we might not ever find the answers to, but what we do know is that Francis ordered this cross out of public view before his death. Okay? We know that. So, that brings us to, let's see, almost done. So just hang in there. Let's finish this guy up. All right. During the Defending the Faith conference, there was a concert offered by a Catholic musician and artist, Matt Marr, in the Fieldhouse. As a Catholic musician myself, I wanted to sit up close to the stage. During the performance, the band had been playing a song about Jesus, so I directed my attention to a large Damiano cross behind the stage and used it as a backdrop for the stage. I had never been so close up to the cross and with the spotlight shining. I saw for the first time a large phallic symbol on the stomach of Jesus Christ. I was shocked, immediately placed in a state of disbelief. I stared and couldn't think about anything else. I immediately began asking the people around me what they saw on his stomach, and they all were dismayed. I couldn't remain in the concert and left for the chapel to pray. I noticed some employees of what had notified some employees of what had just happened. Notified the president of the university, Father Sean Sheridan. He looked at the picture I took and was speechless. I notified everyone I knew there about what I saw. No one could deny it. I felt as if we had all been fooled and that no one had known it was there, subliminal, and had escaped all of our eyes. Much to my surprise, despite the initial shock and disbelief expressed by the staff, priests, and faculty, nothing was being done to address the problem. I immediately began researching this to see if anyone else had seen the phallic symbol and what resulted. The first information I found was a documentary done by Michael Kalachi entitled Rape of the Soul, available on DVD at rapeofthesoul.com. Michael had exposed the San Damiano phallic over 10 years ago. In addition, I discovered St. Bernadette Catholic Church in New Mexico had the Damiano removed from its sanctuary because the people didn't want to see a phallic on Jesus Christ. For years, parishioners at St. Bernadette's in the Heights have looked up from the pews and wondered about the same thing. Quote, I looked up at Jesus because it's up by the ceiling on the altar, said Jerry Boo. I immediately saw genitals of a man. Basically, the story was over 10 years old, yet it never penetrated into the Steubenville community. In fact, after I alerted the Franciscan University clergy about the church in New Mexico removing its cross, local New Mexico news station WKRQE taken the story down from its website. This Pathos site is the only place that references the original story. It is well worth reading that story. Combining the visual confirmation of the phallic symbol on the cross along with previous information that other Catholic churches had rejected it, I presume Franciscan University community would follow step and remove this cross from campus. I was wrong. Despite the discovery and previous discoveries like Kalachi and others, I began to experience persecution. While attending an alumni weekend on campus in October of 2015, I was surrounded by security guards speaking with my friend about the cross. I was told I had to leave the campus despite the fact that I had a paid ticket to be on campus. I filed a complaint with security the next day and received an apology. There have been efforts to have me permanently removed from campus as a result of exposing this cross. I've met with university officials numerous times over the issue. During one encounter with a TOR priest, I was told that it's not there. There's no phallic symbol. It's in my imagination. One TOR Franciscan nun told me that it is there, and she is empowered by the phallic symbol on Jesus Christ. She saw it as a sign of Jesus' creative power, which is actually the pagan belief. Phallic symbols represent procreation, power, and energy. When added to the deity, you have added a face to the phallic, as we have earlier pointed out. The professor from the campus told me the phallic symbol was part of the theology of the body movement. Shows us that Christ was a male, and there is nothing to be ashamed of because the body is beautiful. Basically, as the discussion was started, many different explanations were given in regards to the phallic symbol. In my opinion, the most common defense of the cross is the fact that the church has told the story that God spoke to Francis through the cross, so it must be okay. Many educated people will not even question the use of the cross because it is displayed in Catholic churches, including Assisi and outside altar in Medjugorje, Yugoslavia. This is common amongst Catholics, the misconception of trusting the church as being infallible in everything, despite the horrible pedophile scandal and cover-up that has exposed the corruption within the highest places within Catholicism. Once again, the thing to remember is that St. Francis broke at least 2 commandments after hearing the voice talk to him. He stole from his parents, which the bishop rebuked him for doing. He also dishonored his parents by stripping naked in front of them in the town and renouncing his father publicly. This alone should send red flags, as well as the undisputed fact that Francis began rebuilding a church building as directed by the voice, with which everyone agrees was a mistake. The story was romanticized, distorted, and accepted blindly by many naive Catholics for years. As we are now experiencing an outpouring of truth in these times we are living, it is no longer necessary to simply accept fairy tales in the name of religion. This naivety has led to an explosion of pedophilia, which has permanently hurt the church and its many victims. We cannot cover up for lies and corruption any longer and expect to get into heaven. This is inconsistent with the teachings of Jesus Christ. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So we got to go there. We got to go through Jesus Christ. To further prove the assertion that there is a phallic symbol in the Damiano cross, there should be evidence of pedophilia connected with the places that worship the phallic. When I attended Franciscan University 83 to 85, there was a priest on campus named John Bertolucci. Father Bertolucci, 5 other priests were named publicly and removed from active ministry because they had sexually abused minors in the past. This news came out in 2002. Although he disappeared from campus around the year 1985. We were never given an explanation of where he went. It was rumored that he went to take care of his mother. Father Bertolucci was the most popular Catholic priest evangelist in America at the time of his departure from public life. He spoke to hundreds of thousands of people throughout the world as leader of the charismatic movement within the Catholic Church. He was a Catholic rock star who had his own television show and was held in high esteem on campus. So the most significant priest, right there with Father Scanlon on campus, was removed from active ministry because of credible accusations of pedophilia. Some argue sex with post-pubescent teens is not pedophilia, but rather sexual deviance. He's around students constantly, and yet his sins were kept quiet for many years on campus. Silence regarding this pedophilia in the church is very loud on campus at Franciscan. I believe this is because so many look to Franciscan as the last true Catholic university and are protecting the school. I personally have had many wonderful experiences on the campus, and there are many wonderful people there, but the school is clearly promoting veneration of the Damiano more than anywhere else in the world. Most recently, this past year, a seminarian from the Diocese of Steubenville who graduated from Franciscan before entering the seminary was arrested for attempting to purchase a baby in Mexico for the intention of raping and videotaping the assault. Joel Wright, according to Channel 10 News in Columbus, advertised on Craigslist to pay parents $150 to babysit their children. Franciscan University knew about this and still recommended Joel Wright to the seminary. Franciscan knew about the Craigslist ad placed by Joel Wright before his arrest. The arrest occurred 1 week before Pope Francis went to Mexico, causing great scandal once again for the Catholic Church. The obvious question here is, how could this sick person, Joel Wright, slip through the cracks of Franciscan? The university has chosen to remain silent on the story. Steubenville Diocese, Franciscan University, Steubenville Police, and the woman who filed the report all said they were told by Homeland Security not to comment about anything related to Joel Wright, the federal case against him, or the babysitting. Joel Wright has pleaded guilty. 23-year-old former seminarian pleaded guilty Wednesday, traveling to California to adopt young children and infants with the goal of sexually molesting them. Just 5 years ago, when I moved to Steubenville with my family, I ran into a priest who was working on campus at Franciscan with seminary prospects. The priest had tried to make out with me while I was a student attending Trenton State College back in 1982 when attending a Catholic fellowship on campus. I rejected his advances and left the Catholic Church for a time as a result. I notified Franciscan University of my experience when I saw him on campus, and eventually he was no longer working on campus once his bishop confirmed the accusations against him, Father Vince Inglaterra. He made his profession as a Franciscan in 2008. He was ordained a priest in Trenton, New Jersey, diocese in 1972. There he did some parish work, and from sometime in 1970 until 1984, he was assigned Trenton State Teachers College. From 1984 on, he served outside of New Jersey as Army chaplain, retiring in 2010. He professed vows as San Damiano Franciscan in 2008. 2010, he accepted a position as Director of Priestly Discernment Program, Franciscan University of Steubenville. Inglaterra was accused in a lawsuit settled May 2013 of having sexually abused a minor in the 70s while at Trenton State's College. Review board deemed the accusation credible. Inglaterra was suspended from ministry anywhere, according to a Trenton diocese official. I could go on about the pedophilia and cover-up of pedophilia in the church. It's not just a Franciscan, but the church as a whole. Franciscan community seems to be right in the middle of it. Recently, the Altoona Diocese State Attorney General Office announced the arrest of 3 TOR Franciscans for covering up notorious child abuser Brother Stephen Baker, TOR. The story can be found here. This Franciscan brother killed himself before his trial. I was directed as a youth minister working in Altoona to take my class for a retreat with this man. After his order, was informed that he could not be around children. There were at least 10 San Damiano crosses located in the monastery during my recent visit there before the arrests. A third-order regular Franciscan brother of the province of Immaculate Conception, Stephen P. Baker, was a religious teacher, baseball coach, and athletic trainer at high schools in Youngstown, Ohio, Johnstown, PA, Orchard Lake, Minnesota, and in Inver Lake, Minnesota. He was also assigned at some point earlier in his career to high schools and a boys' home in Norfolk, Virginia. Baker is said to have sexually abused dozens, if not hundreds, of students, mostly male. His modus operandi is said to have to tell athletes they needed massages to prevent injuries, to proceed to rub them down with oils, including their genitals. He's also accused of digitally penetrating them. Former students have said he would grope them in hallways during religion class. One former female student has reported that he requested she show up for treatment of sports injury in loose-fitting clothing and no underwear. Baker was the subject of a 2012 settlement with 11 of his accusers. He is said by a superior to have been removed from ministry long before 2010. Baker took his own life January 26, 2013. In October 2014, the Diocese of Altoona Johnstown and the Third Order Regular Franciscans settled with 88 former Bishop McCourt students who alleged sexual abuse by Baker. And we all know the list goes on and on. I believe there is enough evidence to suggest a connection with the San Damiano phallic cross and the current pedophilia scandal affecting the Catholic Church. To prominently display and worship this cross that clearly has a phallic symbol on it, in my opinion, is scandalous and wrong. To expose thousands of young students to this image with a life-size replica is irresponsible. To remain silent about the abusers who worked at the university is also inexcusable. Franciscan University, for the good of the public, should release all the information they have regarding pedophiles connected to the school. They should encourage anyone who has been sexually abused to come forward with any information, regardless of how old the information is. Matthew tells us, "But he that shall scandalize one of these little ones that believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone should be hanged about his neck, that he should be drowned in the depths of the sea." I cannot think of another passage in Scripture that applies to the scandal any more directly. The victims of the church abuse scandal were Catholic children. Jesus was very clear about how he feels about this. It's absolutely imperative that the molesting children in the church be completely stopped. This can only happen when the lay people get involved and demand accountability. In the name of Jesus and Mary. Mary is the mother of the church and is equally grieved as is Jesus in regards to child abuse in the church. Because of the widespread corruption and many victims, I believe the San Damiano icon must be removed from our churches and schools. If it is a portal for evil spirits, which I believe it is, based on the history we have looked at, not removing it would be idolatry and a sin against the first commandment. If it is not a portal for perverted demons, it should be removed for being a stumbling block to so many Catholics trying to remain pure in an impure culture. Our churches should be places where we can relax spiritually and be blessed. Romans 14, it's not good to eat meat or drink wine or do anything that causes your brother to stumble. These words of St. Paul clearly inform the church that we are not going to put a stumbling block before our brothers and sisters. Jordan Hudson, a theology major from Franciscan University of Steubenville, had this to say about the Damiano cross. It has caused me to struggle with impure thoughts about Jesus Christ. This should end the discussion immediately. This is absolutely the most compelling reason why the Catholic Church needs to remove the Damiano cross from all its churches. This cross is causing young people to sin. Remember what Jesus said, Matthew 18:6, "But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for him to have a heavy millstone hung around his neck, be drowned in the depth of the sea." Many people have expressed their anger towards me because I have been outspoken on the issue. I have challenged many people to debate this cross, including Dr. Scott Hahn. No one has responded with a defense or willingness to debate. I believe this cross is not defensible from a Catholic and biblical perspective. There's no reason that intelligent, prayerful, and truth-seeking Christians shouldn't be able to see. The story told about Francis of Assisi clearly places serious doubt on the claim that Jesus spoke to Francis from a cross. It makes no sense that Jesus would instruct anyone to steal from and dishonor his Father. Bishop of Assisi also confirmed his disapproval to what Francis was doing in response to hearing the voices from the cross. Conclusion, as I had mentioned before, I recently made a visit to meet with Father Michael Scanlon, TOR, and informed him of my book on the subject. I asked him for his blessing on this work, and he agreed to bless me. He agreed to bless and encourage an investigation into the phallic symbol. He acknowledged he was aware of the phallic symbol. This is very serious, and I'm not blaming anyone except the devil himself. I am calling on EWTN Catholic Television Network to remove this cross from all their shows, to stop selling this cross. I'm also asking all the bishops to remove this cross from the worship space set apart for the holy sacrifice of the Mass. Also encouraging all Catholics to remove this cross from their homes, There are too many victims, and pedophilia needs to stop before anyone else gets hurt. The image could be a portal and is a source of temptation for homosexual men. Can anyone honestly say they would want their son displayed this way for the public to see? Let us rather look at reverent and faithful depictions of the crucifixion. Ta-da-da-da-da! Over. Done. So, thank you, my friends, for listening. If you want a copy of the book, The Damiano Demon, you can get it at Amazon.com. Have a great day.